All right, what's up everybody? A little bit of a different video today. So there's an issue that I think we've had for a long time in bodybuilding, and that's just the lack of exercise selection for forearms that trains your forearm in a stretched or a lengthened position. This is something that I was thinking about quite a bit last year, and I think I came up with something that does the job well. I've experimented with this lift that I think is a hidden gem. I'm going to call it a stretched wrist curl because I don't know what else to call it. I've never seen anyone do it before, but I think this is one of those like hidden gem secret lifts that if you actually train properly and train hard, it can blow up your forearms like nothing else. So it's addressing an issue that we've had for a while, in my opinion. So I do think this will be the solution. And I think it can help a lot of us get pretty jacked forearms and really get them popping up on par with the rest of your arm. I think one of the worst looks for bodybuilding is when you have a giant upper arm and a tiny little stick forearm. And most of the training that we do for our forearms is in a either isometric position. So when you're holding a bar and you're just doing an isometric in the most shortened position possible, or we're training it in the shortened position anyways, like a finger curl, even certain wrist curls and stuff like that. So I think this lift overcomes a lot of those issues, and I think it will lead us to be able to have bigger forearms and just have better forearms in general. So I do want to dive into the technique of this lift and give you a tutorial, and then I want to show you guys how to program it properly and some things to take into consideration. So with that being said, let's get to it. So when it comes to the actual setup for this lift, all you really need is a flat bench and a dumbbell. I would definitely recommend using a dumbbell instead of a barbell because, one, the dumbbell itself is going to allow your wrist to articulate in the way that it needs to. When you're using a barbell, you're just going to be locked in. Our wrists are very finite joints that need to move in a very specific way. A barbell just isn't going to allow for that anyways. All right, so when it comes to the actual setup, like I said, you just need a flat bench. You'll just kneel behind it. And then the arm that you start with, normally you would just keep your arm by your side like it would naturally go. When it comes to this lift, especially as you get into heavier weights, you are going to want to shift your arm a little bit closer to your midline, closer to that center of gravity. The heavier the weights get, the more it's going to pull on your shoulder and your rotator cuff. So if you can keep your arm in like this, almost lean onto the other side to make everything a little bit more balanced out, it's just going to put you in a stronger, more leveraged position. So once you're in your setup, you're basically just going to grab your dumbbell, get back to that setup. Your forearm's going to be about halfway off the bench. You have to leave space, obviously, for the dumbbell to not touch the bench. And all you're going to do is start off by just lowering the dumbbell down into your fingertips. So lower it as far as you can. I have a huge range of motion because I have the world's biggest hands. And then you're just going to curl up into your palm and continue to finish just like a regular wrist curl. So in full speed, it looks something like this. One thing that you can do is if you find that your wrist naturally turns in or out a little bit like that, is you can actually grab the end of the dumbbell with your other hand. Don't pull it, don't do anything too much, just kind of keep a little grip on it to keep it in place just like this. So this makes it a little bit more stable, almost like a machine or a barbell, but it still gives you that room to articulate as needed. So a loose grip on the end should be fine. So a couple tips for when you're doing this. Make sure you really lower that dumbbell down into your fingertips for the full stretch, and make sure that when you're doing that, you're not lifting your elbow off the pad because that just negates any further stretch that you get. So it's okay if your forearm wiggles around a little bit. You don't want this to be perfectly strict, but definitely make sure you're actually allowing for a stretch by keeping your elbow on the pad. So curl up as high as you can, go right back down, all the way as low as you can, right back up, just like that. And this is going to hurt pretty bad. It's in a good way, obviously. So it's a very locally fatiguing lift. You can expect to have a crazy forearm pump and just really feel a burn in your forearms. That's very normal. And there's a couple advanced techniques that you can use with this as well. Due to the stretch and just the nature of training this lift in a lengthened position, you're not going to need a whole ton of volume. So you'll notice that after you do each set, there's going to be a lot of attrition from set to set in terms of reps. So you want to make sure that you're not doing a whole ton of volume to start off. You want to focus on intensity. So there's a couple different ways you can make this a little bit more advanced. As far as beginners, I would say even like as simple as one set sounds, you're going to get a lot of stimulus from this lift, so you don't need a whole ton of sets. 1 to 2 sets, 1 to 2 times a week on top of your normal training is fine. I'd recommend going up in frequency before adjusting volume per session. Once that gets to be a little bit easier, you can actually add an advanced technique at least on your final set of the 2, or even if you're up to 3 sets at that point, which I'd argue isn't necessary. One thing you can do as an advanced technique is once you fail in the full range of motion, you can just do finger curls at the bottom. So once you've kind of maxed out your volume and frequency for that, and there's no point in going higher and you're not seeing any better growth after that, you can add another advanced technique, which technically isn't an advanced technique, it's just adding an extra set of a different lift. Once you're done with this, you can actually do a standing finger curl to train in the shortened position. So you just take the same dumbbell and you just do a regular finger curl like this. Yeah, I should fit in the frame. So hold it by your side, regular finger curl in the shortened position like that. And you can just do 1 set on each side to failure. So that's for years down the road after you guys have super jacked forearms and you can handle that type of volume and that type of intensity for lifts like this. So yeah, essentially to summarize everything, push this hard, focus on intensity, build up with frequency before adding a bunch of volume per session. If you require more than like 3 sets per session, you're probably just not training that lift hard enough. I'd rather you just push it a little bit further before increasing the volume by a ton. That works really well on this. Not to say higher volume doesn't work, but I would definitely make sure you maximize that before going the volume route. Leave that as kind of your last resort if needed. So with that being said, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know if you have any other questions.